I'd like to call to order the January 10th meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee. I guess the first item, we have a quorum. First item on the agenda is to adopt a motion to adopt the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. And we will move on to the minutes. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to read the minutes. And I would like to have a motion as to approval of the December 6th, 2022 minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We can move on to item 4 of the agenda, which is the 2023-2024 Head Start Early Head Start Continuation Budget by Ms. Foxworth.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair Grabowski, Superintendent Kennedy. I'm here to present the 23-24 Head Start Continuation Grant. Charleston County School District has been the grantee of the Head Start grant in our county since 2011. What we are seeking is approval of the grant application that is due to the Office of Head Start on March 1st. And so this is all federal funding. So this is, we are asking for the approval of the grant application. The highlights I put in the request, but we are looking to meet the needs of our waiting list, particularly early Head Start. We are doing an overall reduction of Head Start slots so we can expand early Head Start by 56 slots. As a reminder, early Head Start is birth through 36 months. Head Start is 3s and 4s. And so we are looking to reduce the slots in Head Start to also take some more early Head Start. This is allowable by our grantee. We will present it to the Office of Head Start. If there's any issues, they will send it back. But in order for us to submit the grant, we have to get it approved by the board at the January board meeting. And I'm here as well as my grant budget supervisor, if anybody has any questions.
Do I have any questions from my fellow committee members?
No.
Amazing. I got a lot.
Sure.
The first question is, you say it's 100% federally funded.
Mm-hmm.
There's no contribution whatsoever within the state.
We do do you want to talk about non-federal share?
There's a non-federal share requirement of
Can you
20%.
talk to the mic, Avis, please?
There is a non-federal 20% match requirement for the grant, but what we receive from the district as the grantee are non-cash relatable expenditures. That would be the facility uses of the building where the classrooms are housed. That would be the teacher match in the certified teacher arena. And also we have 2 dedicated maintenance technicians that are dedicated to just doing work orders for Head Start. Their salary and benefits.
So we're contributing to the certified teacher salaries.
Yes, we are in the process of transitioning our 3K Head Start teachers to certified teachers. We found after a look at data years ago, pre-pandemic, that our kids who were in our certified classrooms were faring better coming into 4K than the were not. And so we're utilizing Head Start funds to support their education, certification, testing, and all that. And then the agreement was to match once they become certified, to do a 50% match between the Head Start grant and General Operating Fund, or ESSER right now.
And so as I understand it, then out of the 22 teachers, you're looking to increase up to 35 certified teachers.
So there's a total right now of 35 classrooms. We have all those classrooms, but 22 right now are on track to become certified by next year. The rest they are starting a little bit differently. So they're continuing with their coursework at Trident Tech or College of Charleston. So they're time is going to take a little bit more time, but they are supported throughout. We're not going to make them lose their job. They're going to be supported all the way until they finish.
But that's, I think that's my clarification, is that when you say classroom, you're really talking about a teacher.
Correct. A classroom is made up of for Head Start, it's made up of a lead teacher, and the lead teacher is who we are working to certify. And then there's a teacher assistant. In our early Head Start, they're both considered early Head Start leads.
I had a more general question. Just looking at the total cost and the number of children involved, if I'm understanding it right, it's roughly $13,000 per student, which is higher than it seems like we spend in our sort of K through 12 education. Is that because it's a lower student per classroom or number of students per classroom environment? Is that the reason why it's a higher cost than traditional education?
Yes, sir. Based on the number of students in each program, early versus Head Start, the cost per child is based on that total number that's allocated to that program divided by the number of children in the program. So there's about $16,688 cost per child in early and $9,544 per Head Start child.
Got it. Thanks.
It's an excellent question. And I also see that we have an ESSER we're funding an ESSER foundation. I mean, ESSER, how do you have this word? Compliance manager for $78,000.
Sure, ESSER, it's actually URSA.
URSA.
It's actually enrollment, recruitment, selection, and attendance. That is a requirement by the Office of Head Start to have, to make sure those content areas are, so it's not ESSER, URSA, it's actually URSA, enrollment person.
So it's not ESSER, it's
No.
URSA.
Yeah, it's-
Okay. Thank you very much
You're
for that
welcome.
clarification. And I think because of this, this continuing debate over early childhood preparation, which I am such a firm believer that this is the cause of any disparity that we're seeing in our schools. You know, you talk to every principal and they all say the same thing. You know, they can see the disparity of certain kids coming in, and they speak highly of your program. But how much data do you have backing up that what you've been doing the last couple of years has actually been successful?
You can, that'll be a request through both the Assessment and Evaluation Office, but we have been tracking, particularly our child development. We're just now getting into doing some more tracking of our pre-K students. Like I said, that's how we realized that we needed to make a change in the teacher preparation for our 3K teachers. We looked at how the students coming into 4K, not even kindergarten, how our Head Start students were coming into 4K, how they were doing on the 4K assessment. And it wasn't, we did a comparison and it wasn't where we wanted them to be. So we said, this is one strategy to increase improvement. And so we have been tracking that for a while, but we are going to continue. The more early Head Start students we get, the better, more we can track, because we're going to have a larger pool. So right now we only have 184. This will take us up to 240 students that we can track, hopefully all the way from 6 weeks all the way through.
All the way through when?
Well, however long they stay in CCSD.
Oh, as long as they say, because I think I'm more concerned about from when they leave the Head Start program to when they enter into schools. It's that kind of data to show that this early intervention is working and that, you know, we need more of these programs.
We do have data that we presented when we present the kindergarten readiness assessment data. They do break it up by Head Start, CD, previous program, et cetera. So you'll get to see that.
Are there any further questions from the committee? Hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Head Start, early Head Start funding application period June 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2024. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Should we vote?
Can we have a vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving on to item 5, the fixed cost ownership FY23 budget reallocation by Mr. Bowery.
Letters is item 5.
So letter item 5. Let's see what my.
Here.
Hold on. Yeah, I still have- So our agenda.
Here's it. Okay.
Okay, got it.
That's what I emailed you.
Yeah. Let me correct myself. We will move on to item number 5, which is Ellie letters training being presented by Ms. Nichols.
Chairman Grabowski, and all the members of the Audit and Finance. I'm here to present to you a request for professional development training called LETTERS. That stands for, because we love acronyms here in education. It stands for Language Essentials for the Teaching of Reading and Spelling. And it has 5 major components to effective reading instruction, plus writing and transitioning application into the regular, into the teaching classrooms. The state of South Carolina, the State Department of Education in South Carolina required that the schools in South Carolina that were deemed Palmetto literacy schools, and those were schools whose literacy scores were low, that their teachers engage in this in letters training. And so the state has been paying for letters training now for about a year for those schools. In Charleston County, that's 23 schools that the teacher's been engaged in it. Letters is a 2-year training program. Part of it is in person or via Zoom in person, and the rest is an online self-paced with instruction and testing along the way. And there are 2 volumes for that. Each cohort has 40 persons in a cohort. And we would like to train all of the teachers that are not in the Palmetto Literacy Project schools, as well, and all the teachers in K3, in kindergarten through 3rd grade that are in those schools, along with an additional folks such as the coaches, the reading coaches in the schools, assistant principals, all of our special education teachers that teach that age range of kindergarten through 3rd grade, our teachers that teach our English as a second language or MLL teachers. That amounts to about 800 persons that would be taking this training. And the cost breakdown is there for you. There's really 2 parts. The state, I'll back up one thing. The state, when they were doing the Palmetto literacy schools, the state awarded every teacher $500 for the completion of each year of the letters training for a stipend of $1,000. We're recommending, there's a lot of work to go involved in it that the teachers have to do, a stipend of $1,000 per teacher per volume per year. And so there's a cost for to pay the company for the materials, the licenses, and all the materials for the professional learning from a company called Lexia. And in order to, and we'd get 800 licenses to train the teachers at a total cost of $1,323,696. And then there is a stipend request for each of those individuals that complete the 2 years for a grand total of $2,323,000 for the stipends. Those are and I can answer any other questions about this that you have.
And this item got added to the agenda when?
Yesterday,
Yesterday.
due to the implementation of the timing that Ms. Nichols just discussed, it needed to be added to this particular board meeting or committee meeting to move to the board.
What are the time restrictions?
Well, in order to get this, if we're using ESSER money to get the teachers to have the stipend and to pay for the training, we have till September of 2024. And since it's a 2-year, we need to get started this spring, starting our cohorts so that folks can get through. Because after September 2024, we won't be able to guarantee any of the, of course, any of the stipends for sure.
That's if ESSER's not extended to 2027.
Correct. But we don't know that yet. At least I don't know that yet.
So the 3.6 million, that's coming out of our fund balance? Is that I guess I'm not sure. Yeah, where does that come from?
ESSER,
ESSER, it's an ESSER request out of ESSER.
correct.
So it's
ESSER
100% ESSER?
It is.
Okay.
With the
How many?
exception of the portion that the state is funding for the 23 schools identified, the remaining cost, which is the 3.6 million that you see, is funded through ESSER. And again, that's a breakdown between the actual cost of the training material and implementation, as well as the portion related to stipends.
Got it. Thanks.
And out of that cost, how much money are we spending? Because you said that not every teacher has to be certified, but what is the cost? How many do have to be certified versus how many extra slots we're putting in there?
Well, we have estimated that if every single teacher, then kindergarten through 3rd grade, plus the principals, plus our reading coaches, our special education teachers, our multi-language teachers, that would be 800 for 100% participation.
Mr. Duke, your question is really great. Our principals have made this a significant request. Our principals cabinet, they've been steadfast based on student achievement results in our elementary schools on ensuring that we have these processes in place. They've asked for us to consider financially securing funds for beyond grades K through 3, but we've committed right now to only those grades through 3 and some specialized positions like multi-language learner teachers, special education teachers, and our administrators who need to have knowledge of this. So thank you for the question. We're focused solely in this request on just those that our principals have requested, and based on data and national research, what we believe will help us meet that board goal of getting all students reading on grade level by grade 5. So thank you again.
So of the 3.6 million, what portion is state funded and what portion is being funded with the ESSER funds? None of the 3.6 million is state funded. That is merely the district's cost that is being funded through 100% through ESSER. So we did not include the state cost for the 23 projects. 23 schools, excuse me. So is this just a one-time training, or is this something that would be required annually?
That's a great question. This training would be just, we were requesting it for this group of teachers that we have right now. As we hire more teachers, our hope is, our intent is that we will have coaches more equipped to offer professional development to our new staff. Rolling it out in additional years would be up to future board members and us if we had the funding to continue on with it.
I guess that's where I was getting at. If this is
Yes.
going to be something that's ongoing, where it's funding coming from future years.
Right.
Ms. Stamp, this is similar to other curricular choices we have in CCSD and school districts across the state and nation. This is a one-time sort of fee to get everybody that we employ right now up to date on modules 1 and 2. And I see Susan Rawlings on this call too. She's helping Ms. Nichols lead the effort. So hop in here if I misrepresent in any way, but this funding would be to get all teachers that we believe would be necessary to get trained now to get the best benefit in regards to student achievement, to get them up to par. And then there would be an annual fee like we incur with any other curricular choice that we make to onboard or to professionally develop new folks or to extend training in future years. But we do believe this cost, which includes module 1 and module 2 for these teachers, is sufficient for now to get them to where they need to be. Susan, did I misrepresent anything based on your knowledge and work?
You did not. I was just going to add that we have funded this effort. We have funded letters cohorts previously to using ESSER funds, using Title II funds, but it's been on a much smaller scale. And like Ms. Huggins mentioned, we have had principals ask for this for their teachers to do a large scale training around current research and best practices for teaching students how to read. So once we get the bulk of our teachers trained, then we could continue to support additional cohorts, like 1 or 2 a year, to get those that were hired going forward on a smaller scale through Title II funding, like we've done in the past.
And when you say principals, I'm just trying to narrow down the actual target grade levels that we're dealing with. Is this mostly elementary down to early?
Yes, sir.
Kindergarten through 3rd grade.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And the first volume of training, the first year of training is really the foundational skills of early reading skills.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And how many modules are there? Just
There's
2. Yeah,
there's 2 volumes.
There were
2
not
volumes.
more than 2.
We like 2 volumes, and then within those volumes, there's a few units.
Yeah, there's 8 units total, but there's 2 volumes made up of 4 units each. So it's a 2-year training where they would run through 2 volumes.
I'm just trying to make sure they're getting the full training.
Right.
Something else additional that we have to worry about later down the road. Okay. On the ESSER funds, is this part of the encumbered or is this new?
So on ESSER, we set aside an allocation specifically for the district goals and priorities related through the reading goals. And this is funded through that particular initiative.
So that would mean we would be now taking from the actual to date and placing it into the encumbered column?
Once the contractual and procurement process is completed, yes, that's when we encumber the funds.
So it's new money coming over from the remaining. I mean, it's money coming from the remaining fund of that category.
Yes, so the budget is the total allocation and the remaining is based on the actuals, the budget minus the actuals. And so, yes.
Are there any other companies that provide this service? I'm trying to understand the process that went through in finding this one company.
There's not, to my knowledge, another company that does this exact same training. And it came to the state of South Carolina had started the initiative. We heard about it in Mississippi, that different states have mandated it. I think North Carolina is either thinking about it or also mandated.
They have. Mm-hmm.
They have done it. Okay. They have also mandated training for K through teachers in kindergarten through 3rd grade.
And so the state's still going to continue funding what they started.
Yes.
And we're just expanding it to get the full 3rd down.
Yeah. Yes.
Any further questions?
Nope.
Hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve the letters training for district-wide reading initiative at the cost of $3,650,, 696.
So moved.
Second.
Can we have a vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Motion passes. Now we get to item 6 on the fixed cost of ownership for FCO FY23 budget reallocation. Mr. Bowery.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So this reallocation is for a portion of the contingency that was set aside in this program. It's an overall $51 million program. We set aside $688,000 in the event we have an urgent, compelling need during the year to add projects. We're more than halfway through the year now. We want to go ahead and move some of that contingency into needed projects within facility management, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and the media center. Those are our highest and best use of those funds right now. We'll come back to the audit and finance and the board later on this fiscal year to allocate the remaining contingency as well as any sweep up from existing programs.
Any questions from the committee?
No questions.
Is there a list, is there a breakdown of where you anticipate spending these funds at which schools?
If I think I heard your question correctly, Ms. Stamp, it's, is there more detail behind each of those 3 programs? So I'm going to leave that up to the program managers. There are multiple requests within each of those programs. As an example, under furniture, fixtures, and equipment, we've received 27 requests from schools. I'll work with the program manager to identify top needs out of those 27 requests and see which of those could be funded with the amount of money, $200,000 we're proposing to send to them. The remaining need would move into next fiscal year. So I will work with each of the program managers on the resource allocation request. There's not one single project with any of these funds. It'll go to multiple needs within each of those programs.
And like, is there a committee? I know you said you'll work with the program managers, but is there like a committee? Are there criteria that set some criteria as to what's critical, what some type of rating of who gets selected? Because you said you have several requests and I'm sure they amount to greater than the 200,000. So some of them won't be funded. I was just wondering how that process works of how you decide.
I understand. In the end, I leave that up to the program managers to make a responsible recommendation. They look at the condition. As an example, under the furniture, there are 27 requests. Some of them may be for new furniture, some of them may be for replacement. The program manager will let me know what the highest and best need is based on the condition of the equipment, or how long the request has been in the system, where this falls within the prioritization of other requests for that particular school. So there isn't one single method to determine which is the highest priority, but a number of factors will play into that ultimate decision.
And I'm just trying to
Once
understand.
it's allocated, will you come back to us to tell us how it was distributed? Or which ones were funded? Do we get that detail later once it's?
So typically under the resource allocation requests, that typically is not done throughout the year. As an example, under facilities, I believe the amount that we have dedicated to resource allocation requests is currently 200,000. Those are requests that come in during the year. I don't come back to the board with, okay, here's the number of RARs, resource allocation requests that came in during the year. Here's how it was spent. Obviously, within facilities, they manage that. If that is the audit committee's finances request, I certainly can provide it after the fact. That's not a problem.
I'm not sure it's the, when I look at the dollars we're talking about as a percentage of the actual line items, it's a pretty low percentage. It's in the facility size, it's less than 2%. So I'm not sure the detail rises to the level of the committee's focus. I don't think.
Typically, it's been that way, sir. That's the way it's been in the past. You're right. As an example for facilities, it's a $250,000 increase to a $14.5 million budget. In that 14.5, we don't have the level of detail that takes it down to every penny and every dollar. Certainly, individual projects have a line item within the fixed cost of ownership budget, but many of these items don't come to that level. You're right. We haven't brought that to the board in the past because of the magnitude of it.
So really, the
I
only
guess
reason.
my question was more leading towards just making sure that there's fairness that the same schools aren't the ones receiving the funds. That was my only, just having some visibility into that as to who's receiving, and just to make sure that there's a broad distribution, and those that really need are the ones that's receiving.
Yes, ma'am.
And this would have gone back
maybe
to the February 28th, 22 meeting when the actual projects were discussed as to where the money was being allocated.
Correct.
So that probably, if there was an itemization or a discussion of how that was done, that's when it would have occurred.
Well, it would in most cases, if there is a particular school or a project is going to be done, that is an individual item on the list that's approved in February. This is within the resource allocation requests for the facility management and the FF&E piece. It's within requests from a school. Those in the past have not been brought to the board. I understand Ms. Stamp's point of making sure we have equal play across the entire district. We do look at it as the staff to make sure that any one school is not getting their fair share. And certainly if there's a school that doesn't feel they're getting their fair share, we review that with them, show them where the funds are being spent at that level, which is pretty far down to Mr. Griffin's.
Mr. Barlow, maybe, I worry about us trying to go through sort of project by project and trying to say, is this a good use of furniture purchase here and there? But to Ms. Stamp's point, maybe when you do your sort of annual review of our capital program that you do, which is very helpful, perhaps in that you could provide some sort of education or discussion or description to us to help us understand how do you ensure, to the extent we can, ensure equity in terms of the quality of the facilities overall? Like how do you make sure that we're accomplishing that Ms. Stamp's overall objective? Because I think that is, I agree with her point in terms of that being a priority and a concern, making sure that we have equitable facilities across the schools. But I think if you can help us understand how you do that versus us trying to say this is a good desk purchase and that's a bad computer purchase.
Yes, sir. I'm glad you brought that up, because as we prepare for the fixed cost of ownership 24 budget, it would be an opportune time to come forward with the ability in which and how we assess each campus at the strategic level and at the operational level, rather than at the tactical level of saying a school needs 2 chairs in their workroom. And that's something we haven't done as much of in the past. I think it is warranted this spring when we bring the fixed cost of ownership to show you how at that level, we look to see that each school, each of those systems in that school is rolls up into the overall assessment of the school. And then that is taken down to the next level by our program manager. So I'll bring that forward as a separate line item in the February audit and finance. I think it's a good opportunity for all of the board members to see how that's done on an annual basis for the school that determines where in general our funding needs to be adjusted to improve a particular school or schools.
And so basically what's being asked today is just to allow this amount. The only reason it's brought to the board is because it's 495,000. And so it's over the 250 threshold on the contingency fund. So we're just really just moving.
Well, because it's a budget reallocation as well, that's why we bring it forward.
Right, it's listed under program contingency. So we have to get board approval to move it from program contingency.
Right.
So it's not a contract, so therefore it's not on the contract list of $250,000 or greater.
It's just an action.
Now, so the board approved the budget for this particular capital area, and staff is adjusting that budget. And so the board has to approve that adjustment.
But we're basically still under budget or in budget. We're just using contingency funds, which
Yes,
were
sir. We
determined
haven't
back at the initial budget when we put it together.
We haven't changed the bottom line, correct?
Correct. The bottom line hasn't changed. Any further questions?
Move to
I'd
approve.
like to make a motion to approve the relocation of funds as shown on the attached resolution. I have
So moved.
Second.
we have a vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 7, the 2023-2028 Capital Program Phase 5 Sales Tax Early Out Projects by Jay Shaw. And this is for information purposes.
Thank you, committee chair and committee members. In advance of our capital building programs, we borrow money to support design, permitting, and the entire construction process. This item is being brought forward of the 60 million that we borrowed last year. This item is saying that we're going to move around 10.6 million of the same funding to support the 9 projects that are listed below. These are 9 of 25 of the entire list. And this item, the 10 million, will support where these projects are within that construction process, whether if it's currently under construction, finishing up with construction, starting site work. And so that $10 million will help us complete these activities on time. And that completes my report. Thank you.
Have any questions from the committee? I'm complete total ignorance on this and not understand this process at all.
If I can add to that, Mr. Grabowski, I can understand why. In this instance, we're not reallocating funds, we're realigning funds. So we are taking funds that have been, we're keeping the overall project value. We're just realigning the funds that were borrowed to ensure they're executed in time. The overall project amounts stay the same. It's just the timeliness of execution is what's changed here. So this one is relatively unique. You won't see many of these realignments of capital construction funds because we start the sales tax program in 2023. We'll start to get money in 2023. We may have to borrow funds for maybe another year or two until the money really starts rolling in. But this one doesn't happen very often. The realignment of borrowed funds.
And this is just basically to get the funds in to complete the contracts, to complete the projects.
It's based on the progress. So one of these projects was moving a little bit slower that we had dedicated funding for. One of the other projects is moving a little faster. We want to make sure we keep both of them moving at the pace they're on. It was an estimate of how fast we would spend the money initially when it was outlined.
Any further questions from the committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to item 8, which is the IT Steering Committee Quarterly Report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson and committee members.
Naraki.
Yes,
Grabowski, Naraki.
I understand. I'm here today to present an informational
Mickey
overview
Mouse.
of the IT Steering Committee meeting held on October 27th of 2022. We are a little late reporting to you, mostly because of holidays. We'll be more prompt coming forward with our next committee meeting. So this committee is comprised of 5 members, with Mr. Duke leading as our chairperson. This committee is very valuable to me as a director of IT, mostly because it's just nice to have someone from outside our organization give me insight and kind of check and balances of what we're doing. So most of our time was spent reporting on our cybersecurity posture and our current initiatives. We'll continue to use outside sources to perform penetration testing, which is basically hiring companies who don't know our network to see if they can get in, or bring them in and see if they can get out in ways that are not typical. This will expose any vulnerabilities that we may be missing ourselves. We had several questions and comments from committee members, which are always welcome. And we had a good dialogue back and forth and some good actions for me to take from the committee. Mr. Duke also reported on the success of the committee's volunteer effort that he led on Charleston's First Day Festival, which basically was giving information to parents and students about cybersecurity and security awareness. That's the end of my report.
Yeah, I was very impressed by seeing the actual questions and the answers given out, especially Mr. Lauer's concern to avoid becoming a rubber stamp process, which
Yes,
is
sir.
definitely one of my goals with this committee, to create, an active dialogue going back. So it was very refreshing to see the give and take that was going amongst individuals that are way smarter than me. Any questions from the committee? Excellent. Moving on to item number 9. This is the Audit and Finance Committee Charter.
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski.
Ms. Williams.
So currently, the Audit and Finance Committee Charter has language that positions us to review the charter annually or as needed. And so this is that annual review, and staff brings any changes to the committee for discussion, and then finally forwards to the board for majority vote and approval. So going through the document, you all should have the red line document as uploaded on board docs. Besides the header and footer changes, I'm just correcting the fiscal year. Where we made most of the changes were the recurring agenda topics to the back of the, towards the back of the charter. So this calendar is designed to highlight at the top our standing items that we bring forward, our monthly financial report, our monthly capital projects report. The modifications that were made was including the monthly projects report greater than 250,000. As we know, this was something implemented mid-year in 2023. And so the charter was modified to include that as a standing item. Also audit reports. We have some standing audits that we routinely do, and I just want to make sure that stays at the top of the agenda in the particular charter noted here. This also leads to audit recommendations and status as a byproduct of the audit reports. And then we added fixed cost of ownership. This is a standing item as well. Now, outside of the standing items, we went through and assessed when the deliverables are due on a monthly basis from January through December. That's the calendar year, but the deliverables are based on our fiscal year. And where you see the changes, it was either putting the deliverables in the appropriate month and or adding items that should be on this list for visibility to the committee. So for instance, if you look at January, it looks like we removed update on budget progress, but that actually happens in February. And so it was added there. Also, what was added is our spring bond anticipation notes. These are notes that are pretty routine. And so just making sure that each one of these months reflect the deliverables as they currently stand, and modifying it to add any new deliverables that have come up over the past 12 months since the last review. And some were just subject verb agreement or language corrections. Any questions, please?
I have a lot of questions and reservations about this charter in whole, especially all of the language. And I really think it needs to be reviewed, especially the second paragraph, in which the committee's scope of responsibility will not include oversight of transactional matters, i.e. specific operating and capital expenditures, disposals of assets. I don't want to get into a situation where we're micromanaging. However, when you go back over to page 3 of the document, at the board's request, financial services proposed transaction, new program services, as well as proposals to discontinue programs and service and make action recommendations to the board. And then the following, there are multiple paragraphs in which we talk about the committee's ability to look at transactionals. My concern is putting in not only the transparency side of it, but making sure that certain situations are covered by the committee in which the proper audit and accountability functions are in place. So, Mr. Kenny, I'd love to understand what the definition of transactional matters is to you. Dr. Kenny, I apologize.
It's not doctor, it's Mr.
Mr.
Yeah, so you asking what my definition of transaction is. So the district spends on all of our funds, our total funds, I don't know the exact number, but somewhere north of $1 billion per year. So that includes the general operating fund, all our federal funds, all our state funds, all of our capital funds. So I can't imagine how many thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of financial transactions it takes to process. So for instance, we receive a grant from the federal government that comes to the state. There are, I think, at least 2 systems here in the district required by the state that we have to input financial data to transmit to the state. The state transmits some of that data back to us. So each of those is a financial transaction. Whenever we have somewhere upwards above 6,000 employees. So anytime we have an employee that travels, that's a financial transaction. Every pay that every 2 weeks when we do our payroll, each payroll, not the whole process, but each person's payroll that's processed is a transaction. Each person's withholding is a transaction. So everything that we do from a financial standpoint to manage to collect, record our funds, and record how they're expended and how they're budgeted and then expended is the financial transaction. And again, I don't have a way, maybe, well, I don't think staff has a way to know what the magnitude of those financial transactions are, hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
Significant. And if I may add additional context. So if you think about our retirement contributions, that's a calculation for each individual employee based on time and tenure. It's very complicated. Our revenue projections, anytime we book revenue, the cash flows, all of these are financial transactions. If an employee buys a pen with district dollars, it's a transaction, a book, a pencil, a chair, everything. So I think the language in the document, but the language in the document isn't intended to be restrictive in any way. There are hundreds of thousands of transactions to spend down $1 billion in a 12-month period. And so what the language is intended on the second page where you noted at the board's request, the board committee has the autonomy and right to ask for any financial information that it deems necessary and will provide that. But to monitor and bring forward every transaction, that is a Herculean effort that I'm not sure any financial institution or school district can do successfully.
I would agree. I would agree with one caveat. Purchasing a curriculum, transactional? Is that a transactional action?
Well, the end result is a financial transaction, but there's a lot of non-financial activities that take place to get to that point. So Shauna mentioned in time, purchase a pencil, although this is my personal purchase here, but in time, a pencil is processed, so it's relatively easy transaction. Someone needs an office supply, they record it, they get it through a P card, that becomes a financial transaction. If you need a curriculum that costs millions of dollars, then there's a process that you go through, and then the end result from a financial standpoint is a financial transaction. But there's it's like developing the budget. So there's a process for developing the budget that does not include financial transactions for the budget development necessarily, at least the strategies of it that we talk through the Audit and Finance Committee, we talk through the school board, and then ultimately what gets entered into the system is a series of financial transactions.
Because I just think the wording, this approach will allow the committee more capacity to focus on the responsibilities outlined below. I mean, it's kind of a slap in the face, in my view. I mean, I think we need to go back to the old wording and just, it's not the board's intention to sit and deal with the transactional expense of a pencil, but it is the board's duty and is the committee's obligation to make sure that the transactions are reviewed that reach up to the possible 250 limit, or anything, or a potential vendor that comes in, signs a contract for 100,000 and suddenly submits, invoices. And the next thing we know, they're up to $1.5 million. And it may not, that initial contract may not have come under review. So I just think one of my recommendations, and I know it's part of the policy that it has to be presented to the board in writing, and that's why I wanted to bring it up to the committee for further discussion. I know that this doesn't have to be done specifically at this meeting. It can be done at a meeting in the following months, once we get the proper wording, once I talk to other board members that are raising some of this concerns. But I just think that that's more in line with what we're trying to accomplish here. We're not trying to accomplish the fact that we're going to micromanage every transaction. That's I agree with you. Hundreds of thousands, $600 million. No, but there is that point of view where you should have that discussion. And I just don't think this language in there is read by the general public and has been perceived by other people. I know what the potential intent was, whether I agree or not, it's not. I'm just saying right now at this particular day, I think we should go in and just revisit some of this wording and make it more consistent. That's all.
Yeah, if you're suggesting, Mr. Grabowski, that that we delay approval of this, that's nothing to prevent that would preclude us from doing that. It's on the calendar for January every year, but it doesn't necessarily have to. So we're having a discussion today. We can make it final in February, as an example, or whenever the committee says we want to make these changes final.
Do you have any other further questions from the committee?
I have just a couple quick comments. I think ultimately this charter should reflect what the board wants out of this committee, right? So, and each board is a new board and can make their own determination. And I wasn't here when this initial charter and committee was established, but I was here a number of years ago when it was sort of revisited and reconsidered further. And my impression of that past, and some of you have a longer tenure and memory than I do, that this committee was organized in a way with an intent that was somewhat analogous to an audit committee of a public corporation or a for-profit company. And that is more generally oriented toward high level ensuring that the audit's done properly, ensuring that we have high level procedures in place and review in place at a high level to one, help make sure that the district is on track from a fiscal perspective, but also as a fiduciary, that's all progressing. But it was not, my impression was that it was not organized in a way that's intended to lend this committee, or lead this committee down a path of micromanaging, individual transactions. And so I think while we don't have a say, I hope the board continues along that path as far as an objective for this committee, because I don't think it will be successful if we go down the path of looking at lots of individual transactions where I do think, or I hope this committee can be most helpful. In addition to some specific expertise that Ms. Stamp and Mr. Duke bring and others, people from the banking world, and we've got some expertise in here that's helpful. But where I hope we're helpful is one, making sure that we're managing that audit process properly, that we're bringing an independent perspective on how those things are done. Also, I'm appreciative of the fact that what's been added to the calendar is this multi-year look. That's always been high on my agenda, because I think that's one of the things that we can try to help is to keep the eye on how is our fund balance looking? What are the other metrics that the rating agencies look at when they look at us, to ensure that we have a sound financial position over an extended number of years. Those are I think the high priority things that will help ensure our financial position for the district. If I could add one more thing to it, and we just got the multi-year look so I don't know that I should be asking for more, but I think I do think it would also benefit us to look at select metrics relative to peers, financial and maybe otherwise. That's a different, I try to stay in our lane in terms of being financially focused, but looking at our financial metrics and comparing those to peer institutions, both within the state and outside the state. And I know we're subject to our own state construct as far as how our finances work, but we do compete with other states for attracting, teachers and staff. And we are trying to educate our students in a way that's comparable to, or comparable or better than other states. So I think having some other districts that are similar size, but in other states, could also be helpful. So anyway, I think adding some peer benchmark data would be an add that would be helpful to our broader objective as a committee. But that's just one opinion.
Yeah, on the comparing metrics to other districts, a little over a decade ago, the Council of Great State Schools initiated a significant initiative to do just that. So they have created a whole process of creating appropriate financial indicators, KPIs, with a metric definition for each one. They send out a survey to member districts every single year. I think Jackie Carlin here in our district is responsible for coordinating that. And then so we input data, other districts input data across the country. The council has a group that compiles all that and then actually creates a report that compares your district to other districts, and they identify the districts that are performing well, and you can see who's performing well, who's not, and then what are some of the strategies that they're using to do that. So that's in play. We just need to, we put it into the charter, then we just need to follow through and do reporting to the committee.
Yeah, if we could share that with the committee, I don't know how frequency, once a year or however often it's available, I think it would be informative. Because it's hard to know, frankly, how much we spend per student and what our facility class sizes are. It's hard to look at that in a vacuum without having some perspective of other schools.
Noted. Thank you.
And the other one's just kind of like a personal pet peeve. Getting dumped with 50 pages of documents on a Thursday night. And unfortunately, I was on vacation at the time, but still, it was fascinating reading on the planes that I had to take. I just think there should be something within this charter that if we're going to discuss something at a committee meeting, that the documentation is provided 5 working days in advance, not taking into account a weekend, because it just seems, every time we get these documents Thursday night and whatever, you spend a weekend reading them, preparing for a Tuesday meeting. So, I would think when we look at this charter revision, and I'd ask for the committee's opinion, but just getting 2 packages of documents and seeing and realizing the amount of work that goes on is fascinating, but at the same time, it's a little overwhelming.
I can appreciate having to read through so many documents. I can appreciate that. Let us take a look at that, okay? And so we need to take a look at the process. So at the end of each month, that's the end of a financial period. And so it takes time to close that period out, assemble the data, and then analyze the data, and then report. And so part of it is the front end work. And then part of it is making sure that the CFO has the opportunity to meet with the Audit and Finance Committee Chair, make sure that y'all agree on the agenda. So we'll take a look at, do we, how we improve that timeline.
Yeah, because it also goes into the scheduling of this meeting. I mean, I see there's ample time to move this meeting a couple of days back to give you more time that prevents us from being rushed, because I understand you have to get the data, allocated, whether it's a Tuesday or we move this to Thursday, gives us those 2 extra days. It's just, I think it would be a little nicer sometimes, and even with these last minute add-ons, rather than the precious weekend.
A good point. So we'll look at that.
Any further questions from the committee? I really would like to postpone this. Okay. I would like to make a motion to postpone the approval of the updated Audit and Finance Committee charter to the next meeting of the Audit Finance Committee in February.
I think that's fine. I don't think we have to even make a motion. We just won't move to approve it.
There we go. Fine. And I make a motion not to approve. Do I have to back up now and restrict the first motion I drafted? And then I make a motion not to approve the updated Audit and Finance Committee charter.
I mean, are we really not approving it, or are we just extending the period for review of it? Because, I mean, what?
I think we can just move on. I think we just need to, we don't need to make.
Saying not approving,
that sounds worse, right?
Yeah. I would just say, just leave, we'll just bypass it.
All the volunteers take 1 step forward, we'll step backwards.
So there's no vote, no motion to approve. I mean, no first and second, so we can move on. A non-action. Okie dokie. Item number 10, approval of projects over 250,000.
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski. So with the items on the list before you, we have 12 items totaling 22.6 million. The majority of the items are associated and related to either facilities management or capital programs. All of these have been pre-approved. These are just the contracts attached to those pre-approvals. There is one ESSER funded item for Kids on Point, and Ms. Simmons is here to discuss that item if there are any specific questions related to that. And Mr. Barori is here for any of the contractual item discussions on the list. What questions do you have, please?
So I guess I had a question on the Kids on Point. Side note, I'm a huge fan of Kids on Point and what they do. But what is the district paying them to do?
Good afternoon, everyone. So the Kids on Point package was a part of our outreach, more or less, to get more community-based organizations to support our work in terms of providing both educational and enrichment opportunities for our scholars. And so they serve predominantly scholars in District 20, the downtown area, the peninsula, students who are typically disadvantaged, as well as District 4. And so they put forward a proposal to enhance that program that they already have been in place for more than about a dozen years or so on the peninsula.
And I just want to make sure that, I mean, again, I'm a huge fan of the organization, but I want to make sure that we don't have the appearance of conflict because one of the board members was affiliated with Kids on Point, right? One of the previous board members, not current board members.
That's correct. So the organization had the opportunity, as well as any other organization, to put forth a proposal, and they did so. And because of their longstanding work and service to our areas, they were one of the ones that proved to be beneficial to both District 20 and District 4. So the conflict of interest, I can't necessarily speak to that, but I can speak to the merits of the proposal.
Was there any influence from or pressure from a board or board members on selecting them?
No, sir. I can speak for myself as the sitting interim CAO. I received the proposal, had some folks on my leadership team, learning services team, vet it alongside me, and we move forward with it. I haven't had a direct conversation with the former board member about this particular package.
I echo that as the CFO. I've had no conversations or interaction at all from the former board member.
And I presumed all that to be the case. I just, since it's on the list, we should ask.
So this said it was awarded by board exemption number 71015. So does that mean that this was the only vendor that you looked at and they were awarded the contract via an exemption?
Yes, that was the only vendor that we looked at.
So I just want to add some additional context, Ms. Stamp, to that comment. So there were several community-based organizations that submitted ESSER proposals to do work in the district. Kids on Point was one of them. Many of the academic contract actually fall under that exemption code. So I just want to highlight that that's not abnormal. Mr. Wiltshire, do you have any additional context? Maybe you could define that code specifically for the committee. I think that would be helpful.
Yes, just bear with me a second. I'll pull that up. That exemption there is for 7.1.5. That exemption is
710.15. Yes.
Yeah. That is for educational services. That exemption covers educational services provided to students.
And that board member is no longer a board member now. So there's so it's not like that was approved. It's being approved now, right? After that board member is gone.
Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
I don't have any further questions.
We appreciate those questions. It's my understanding, and Ms. Simmons, please do step in and correct me if I'm wrong, that several of our schools have been working with Kids on Point for some time. And this was a way to consolidate all of those into one and fund through ESSER. Is that right, Ms. Simmons? And again, please feel free to correct me.
For sure, that's accurate. A lot of the school principals knew of Kids on Point before I did. And so they have a long-standing reputation and work service to the system. And so that's how I came to know about the program.
So once again, this is a new drawdown on the ESSER funds.
Not new. So before we were awarded the ESSER dollars, we had to present an actual proposal where we anticipated budgeting the entirety of the grant. We did that. So the actual category that Kids on Point is associated with an ESSER has been pre-approved, pre-budgeted, et cetera. There was a specific allocation set aside for community-based organizations, and this is just one of those community-based organizations.
And who vets this whole process?
Which part of the process, sir?
So a community service makes an application out of these income, out of these budgeted funds that we've allocated from the total pot of funds. So who is vetting? I mean,
Oh, I see.
I'm not
I
I'm
think
not
I follow you.
questioning Kids at Point,
Mhm.
but going forward with some of these, ESSER requests and working with staff on this, I mean, for the accountability, I would like to see clawback provisions. I would like to see some type of, auditing to show. I've been involved in after-school programs. I know the number of kids goes down, yet groups still ask for the same amount of money. It just seems like a simple request, to have a little more data, in making a review, other than this nonprofit has been making a difference to Charleston County school students' lives for over a decade. It would be nice somehow, and then once again, not trying to over micromanage, but when you get above these amounts of $450,000, to have just a little more of a bite to understand exactly why we're doing this. I mean, it's budgeted community service. I understand that, but
So what, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sean.
So thank you, sir, for your question. So there was a formal process, an application, a submittal. And Ms. Simmons, do you want to talk through that application process from schools and community-based organizations? It was vetted. There was a committee set up. It's a very detailed process. So Ms. Simmons can elaborate on that some.
And I know this will follow in the next item when we start going through on the information side of it. It was just kind of odd that this one came within the capital, project amount. But this has already been basically reviewed, vetted,
Right.
budgeted.
And I would love for Ms. Simmons to talk about the process.
We're talking about the $250,000 list, right?
Sir, I'm sorry.
We're talking about $250,000.
Well,
Which
Mr. Grabowski,
item are we on?
we're talking about Kids on Point on the $250,000.
So it's on that list, not because, typically, most of the items on there are capital, but it's on this list because we entered into an agreement or contract with an entity that's greater than 250,000. And so what's being reported in the next item here on ESSER is simply a financial report on where we are. Okay.
But there was a vetting process specifically with selecting these particular vendors. Ms. Simmons, do you want to talk?
Yes. Yes, we had a rather thorough and comprehensive process that involved teams of district staff, finance, human resources, school-based folks who took a look at all of the proposal to see the merits of what they had to offer and if we thought it would be a benefit to the district. And there are other community-based organizations who we've partnered with as well. I don't feel a need to name them. This just happens to be one of the ones that has come forth in this time frame that this particular meeting has allowed us to put this, juxtaposed to the capital projects, not that we're trying to hide it or attach it to something that it shouldn't be. This just happened to be the window of time that it cleared, was vetted, and ended up on Audit and Finance.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons.
So, and then that process of actually vetting these proposals was created, I think, it was either in the spring of last year or the winter of last year, or about 2022. And there were a number of outside organizations, nonprofits that submitted their applications. And a lot of those we had, through Michelle and others, we had a thorough process where we central office in this team worked with schools, individual schools, as schools pulled together their desired use of ESSER, and which organizations, nonprofit organizations they wanted to work with. And then there was a central part of that also. So I think I heard Ms. hug and say that in the past with this particular company, a firm, a nonprofit, they were working with individual schools, so it made more sense to consolidate versus, yeah. So there was a process that was developed to review all of the proposals, and this one just happened to be, as I think I heard Ms. Simmons say, just sort of like it's the timing when it's coming to this committee and to the school board.
Do you have any further questions from the committee?
I just think with the purchasing actions, because these are coming to us once they've already been awarded. In reading the committee charter, one of the things that supposedly is the responsibility of this committee is to ensure that processes were in order, in that and for when you talk about procurement and the question that was posed earlier, trying to ensure that there wasn't a conflict of interest, the only way the committee is going to know that is if you know who, when you have the solicitations where there was a committee that reviewed and selected the vendor, who's on those committee, who makes up the committee, who those individuals, because that's usually where you run into issues on these procurements. It's are we using committees where there are no conflicts of interest? And I'm sure they're signing waivers that state that they have no conflict with any of the vendors that they are about to review. But I'm not sure if it's some way that we could, and I know you've added some information to the schedule since we've had these conversations, but just really trying to look at and review the process that was taken. What were the criteria that they evaluated these vendors against, to make sure that the evaluation criteria weren't biased. Those are the kinds of things, just me personally, that I would feel that voting on these purchases to say, yes, the process based on the information provided, the process was reasonable, and I agree with it, but I just don't think we have enough information to do that without knowing, some of those criteria that were used.
Ms. Stamp, I just want to make sure I understand your question and/or concern. So are you asking us to provide like the procurement review committee, the names, or do you want us to give you a full scope report of the entire procurement process for each one of these items? I want to know the ask, so we can.
Just basically some summary, like you said, who were the members on the committee. I believe once the award is made, that information can be made public. I know while you're going through the process, that information can't be disclosed, but I believe once these get to us, it appears all of these contracts have been awarded. So just some general information about.
They aren't awarded. I just want to be clear. So these are not awarded.
These haven't been awarded yet?
Oh, ma'am.
So how do we have, I thought we had vendor names on here.
We do.
It says vendor name, so we don't have contracts yet?
Mr. Welcher, do you want to give some additional context, please?
We have draft contracts. We haven't finalized the contracts. We don't finalize the contracts until they go to the board for approval. Once the board approves, then we finalize the contract. But if you look on those sheets, each item there's a justification, And if it lists that there's a solicitation, it has gone through the solicitation process, which that vendor was selected via the criteria that's in the solicitation. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Ms. Stamp, you were wondering if there was a selection committee for each one of these, and each one of those that we solicited, there is a selection committee. It's vetted through that selection committee who identifies the vendor. And we're only listing the vendor here who was the highest ranked vendor.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Is it possible for us to just get a summary of what the criteria were that they were vetted against, and then a list of who made up the committee and what areas they were from? Is that at this phase of it, can you release that information?
We can release it inside the organization here. And actually, in the past, what we used to do prior to this 250 list, we used to prepare a board update for all of the solicitations that we release, and that board update will include that information. We can revert back to providing that update.
That would be good, because to me that, we could look to see who the individuals are and just have more assurances that, we feel the process was followed. Just from the information here, I don't think we can do that.
Yeah. Well, the purpose of that update was to give a recap of the solicitation process.
Right. Okay.
Ms. Stamp, we can regroup internally to discuss potentially offline with you what you're looking for specifically to share with the committee to see if we can compile that to meet your need.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think there was some misunderstanding as to what the board exemption exactly meant.
The Board of Trustees have created a list of exemptions for staff to use and generally focuses on educational services. I can provide a list of those exemptions.
And usually with the exemptions, you don't have to put it through a formal solicitation process.
Well, it eliminates the competitive process, but the rest of the solicitation process you have to follow.
Correct.
Any further questions? Then I'd like to put through a motion to approve the projects on the attached list regarding all purchase of 2,000 and 50,000 or more.
So moved.
Second.
Vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. And here I think we'll find a lot of answers to questions. Moving on to item 11. The federal funded, this is the ESSER funding summary by Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski. So what the district did was compile a summary of ESSER 1, 2, and 3 to share with the committee so that we see the entirety of the spend plan, what's been expended in fiscal years 21 and 22 and 23 to date, what's encumbered and what's remaining. The district received an ESSER 1, 13.4 million, which is fully expended. ESSER 2, 72.63 million, which is underway. And ESSER 3, which is 163.23 million. And so how to read this report, we've itemized each one of the ESSER categories and the associated spending. And this is just to give you a high-level summary of the activity as well as where we are to date with spending. We do include a few footnotes at the bottom. You'll notice in ESSER 2, I'll just call out one of them, the remaining balance is a $2.5 million deficit. It's actually a pending amendment that will clear that balance. And how it was generated, we actually allowed principals and school leaders to retain their positions and their people for an additional year to meet the actual needs of the school, to offset some of the adverse impacts of COVID. I'll entertain any questions that you have, please.
Were these categories, did you all develop these categories? I'm just curious. And then what is the addressing learning loss? I thought that was kind of part of the general objective of all of this, but.
Correct. So no, we did not develop the categories. So with each ESSER allocation, the federal government stipulates categories that you can budget for and they award funds for. So with ESSER 3, there are 15 categories. 2, there's a number of categories, and 1, there were as well. So what we selected when we developed the plans were the categories that match the district's plan and our approach to COVID remediation, learning loss, and the different activities that are allowable on each one of the ESSER 1, 2, 3 grants. So while we did not define the original categories, that is a part of the grant, we did submit a budgetary plan under each one of the specific categories in detail for those awarded amounts.
So for example, what is learning loss? I mean, I know what the concept of learning loss is, but like, what are some of the types of things we would spend money on to address the learning loss?
So I'll wait for the academic folks to jump in. But the last 2 summers, as an example, I don't remember how much money we spent, but it was millions of dollars that was spent on summer school. Prior to the pandemic, we had X number of kids that typically would come through summer school each summer. And what we tried to do during the pandemic is, after we came back in person, was to expand the number of students that were attending summer school. And so that's an example. That's an example where we had a major expenditure in this category of called learning loss, summer school.
So what types of activities? What types of activities would be in the other activities? That's a large sum.
So we would have to go back and pull. There are a number of activities under each one of these categories. And so if you would like the granularity, we have to produce a subsequent report.
No, I was just wondering, like, just in general, just throw out some things that might fall into that category.
Lisa Sizzler is on the call. Lisa, can you provide some context, please?
I can. I'll give you a good example. In ESSER 2, we provided compensation for teachers that were teaching in dual modes during the year, and actually extra substitute teachers in classrooms for kids that were out or quarantined due to COVID. And that was, I don't remember the exact amount, but that would have fallen in that other category. If it wasn't categorically described in one of the categories above, the state allowed us to put any number of things in other, as long as it was explained to them what we were doing and they approved of those activities.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to the ESSER 2, where you have the $2.5 million over budget, yet at the bottom there's still $4 million left in the funds. So what is the plan for that $4 million that's left in the?
So to the second column after the number column, under each one of these particular categories, there are a host of activities that were planned for to expend the full amount of the 72.6 million that you see in ESSER 2. And so that remaining 4.3 has been already designated as a part of the activities under the listed categories. Here, we can pull information to give you the specifics of the activities associated with the remaining balance, if that will help.
But do you anticipate any further over budgeting, as if from what you got on line 3, where you had the 2.5 million?
So I want to just classify it as amendments versus over budget. So the entirety of the budget is 72.6 million. We will not go over that number. We are not allowed to go over that number. However, amendments take place throughout the grant, throughout the life cycle of the grant. So we do amendments right now quarterly. So if, for instance, when we did the preliminary plan, if we anticipated needing $100,000 for additional staffing support for kids to prevent learning loss, let's say we meant the need with $60,000. That $40,000 difference would be amended to another category where there's a need, but the total bottom line number does not change.
And the reason I bring it up is I thought the whole idea of a lot of these application requests were that whatever project you were funding, it had to be sustainable. So it would appear that in line 3 with the principals and school leaders, whatever they're doing, you've gone ahead and agreed to extend it another year.
Mhm.
But it originally was only funded, or they requested 1 year. So it would assume that they must have had some success and they were looking for a way to fund it an extra year, and you were able to find money within the fund on an amendment.
Correct.
Would that be a correct assessment?
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I got distracted here. So, I'm not sure. I want to make sure I understand the question. So we have $13 million worth of ESSA 1, $72 million worth of ESSA 2, and $163 million worth of ESSA 3. So we have plans to expend that, but there's no way that whatever we put in place with that amount of funds, we will not be able to sustain 100% of that, if that's what the question is.
Yes, I thought that was one of the main requirements of the ESSER fund, was to have a sustainability.
It is not. It's not an expectation from the federal government that all these school districts across the country will be able to sustain through their general operating fund and some other funding sources all this money. So what Ms. Williams has done this past year, she's addressed part of that through how we approach the use of fund balance. So I think the number that she set aside in fund balance for ESSER sustainability for this year, not this year, but the last fiscal year 22, is $10 million.
Mhm.
So as we close the books out for this fiscal year, we need to be looking at the same thing. And we do not, in fact, want to sustain 100%.
No.
Because 100% of what we're doing is not going to prove to be effective.
Right.
So part of the work is to do this program evaluation to determine what's most effective and then sustain that. So for example, we have roughly half, 50% of our kids almost across the district in grades 2 through 8 read below grade level. So we have strategies. We talked about 2 of them. Day 1 is on early childhood expansion. And so we're using some ESSER dollars for that. And so if that proves, as you asked Ms. Foxworth, what's effective, if that proves to be effective, then we would presumably come to the committee and the board and say, we'll use part of this $10 million in fund balance to sustain that. What's effective.
And the approach is to build up that sustainable pot of money over time through fund balance. So, but that we are not intending or required to maintain all of the initiatives that are funded with ESSER.
In fact, Mr. Grabowski, thank you for the question and the context Mr. Kennedy added. This year, we assessed some of the return on investment after 1 year of expending some of those funds. And we discontinued, particularly in our elementary schools, a significant portion, not as much in our middle and high schools, but we are looking to use actual quantitative data to determine what positive impact these funds have had on schools before we make a motion to continue any such practice or employment in our schools. So grateful for the question, but Ms. Williams has helped us put processes in place to determine cost benefit analysis.
And just for the public's knowledge, all of these plans are on the website. All the projects are on the website listed as to what their goals are and everything. But I guess the next question comes down to, are we ever going to update the website as to what was successful and what was not? More importantly, what was?
Yes, so we will, In fact, some of our principals, we can work with John Cobb and his team, Ms. Williams, to make sure that as revisions are being made to those plans, that they are updated through our communications office on our website. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
We have been working on those updates, sir.
Because, you know, the question keeps coming up. People hear this large amount of money, then you hear about this deficiency, then you hear about this, and then they're going like. So I think we need to do just a little better marketing job of the successes, which I know are out there. So.
Yes, and we're in the process. I think we started before the holiday break of updating the information on the website regarding ESSER. So we can give a full report back at the next meeting as to where we are with that project.
Any further questions from the committee? Excellent. Hearing none, I guess we will move on to item number 12, the monthly capital report.
Yes, I'll defer to Ms. Costello to cover the report, please.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Good afternoon, Chairman and Committee. I'd like to present the November 2022 capital projects report. Our revenue collections for the current month were 5.1 million above the 2% cash flow model projections. The expenditures for the month are as follows. The 2010 through 2016 capital building program, phase 3, 0. The 2017 through 2022 capital building program, phase 4, $2.2 million. The 2023 through 2028 capital building program, phase 5, had $1.2 million in expenditures. The 2023 through 2028 capital building program funded with long-term debt had $38,000 in expenditures. The fixed cost of ownership fiscal year 23 program is underway, and the fixed cost of ownership project list for fiscal year 24 will be presented to the board in February. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions with the committee? Hearing none, I always like to hear an excellent report. Moving on to item number 13.
Thank
The
you.
monthly financial update, Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski. So what this report represents is a snapshot of our revenues and expenditures, actuals through to date, year to date, in comparison to this point in time last year. And so the change column represents the dollar amount and then the percent in change, and any large anomalies we walk through and explain through the notes. So here, our total revenues received through the month of November, the local tax revenues are $4.3 million lower, not because we received less revenue, but because of a timing difference. We actually received those funds earlier this year than we did last year, which explains the variance from last year to this year for local tax revenues. For state revenues, due to the modification in state funding formula that was passed during this previous legislative session, the district actually is allocated more state revenues. So our revenues are up $3.7 million in comparison to last year. The total transfers are lower this year compared to last year. This is just due to the new state aid allocation formula under the state. In previous years, the transfers were reported differently, so the funds show up differently here. On the expenditure side, our expenditures are have increased in salaries and benefits as anticipated by $4.7 million. This is attributed to the FY23 budget, where we indicated we were doing a lot of salary incentives and employee retention bonuses and a lot of other initiatives to retain our staff and to attract new staff. So the increase is reflective of those budgetary decisions. Our purchase services are actually $3.4 million lower this year compared to last year, largely due again to a timing difference in when we receive first student, our bus vendor invoices. And this is largely due to the accounting team working through some reconciliations. Our supplies are also lower this year when compared to last year. And this is due to the decrease in purchasing COVID-19 supplies compared to where we were last year in our COVID purchases and initiatives at the school level. Our total transfers are $2.4 million higher. This is due to increased charter school payments. So it's based on average daily membership. So basically more enrollment, more dollars. And so that $2.4 million transfer is reflective of that. The total reserves, $2 million we set aside for enrollment adjustments after the 7th day of school. We've used approximately $600,000 of that due to all of the enrollment adjustments and changes in the 7th day. Overall, we're faring pretty well with revenues and expenses. This will be the last month that we report just revenues and expenditures. The next report you see will be moving into the year-end projection. That's where we look at our budget, projected expenses, and where we'll end up at the fiscal year under over budget, and the analysis and discussion that we have related to that information once presented. What questions do you have, please?
Does the committee have any questions?
Mr. Griffin, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Sorry. Next month is the month where we start to project through the end of the year, correct?
Correct.
Great, thanks.
Absolutely.
On your report, you have under 3A on the salaries, the 2,000 plus a step, but then you have a step plus the amount to maintain 97% of the market for classified staff and administrators.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
I saw Mr. Brigman on 3A.
3A.
It's the $2,000 step increase, 97% market value retention.
Yeah, so a number of years ago, I don't know how many years ago, but probably I think we've had 2 or 3 what the HR folks call a salary review for the district, where they bring in an outside vendor, the vendor takes a look at the different categories of employees, and they do a market analysis to determine where each category of the employees, each category is in relationship to the market, whatever the market is. I don't know what that market is, but they take a look at, well, I do have some sense, they take a look both at governmental entities like other school districts. They take a look at local companies that are commercial type companies. So do a good comparison. And so historically what's happened in the district, we fall, our employees, the pay of our employees fall below market. And I think when I first got back here in 2018, I think we were at like from almost across the board at 90% of market. So if the market says a person can make, let's say $100,000 out in the market, then we were 10% below that. That's an example. And so over time, over a period of years of successive budgets, the board has elected trying to come closer and closer to market. And so I think where we are now, I think it's this 97% that we went to last year.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a plan to get to 100%, and we haven't been able to do that. But this gave us an ability to get closer to that 100%. So it's a recognition that employees, wherever they're working, need to be compensated. And for us, it's also a matter of retention.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So this is going to be a factor that we're going to look at in the next budget as it comes through. I mean, this is already in place as the budgets are standing now, we're at the 97% rate, and the goal is to get to 100%.
Yes, I would say with the caveat, I don't remember off the top of my head if all categories of employees are at that 97%. There may be some nuances there, some differences, but the concept is yes, your concept is right.
It's classified staff and administrators at 97%. Those are the 2 classifications. But yes, we will revisit this during the FY24 budget development cycle.
And the reason is, it's just the perception. If I'm a teacher and I'm looking at this and saying that you're looking at market cap, and then I'm not getting a raise, yet you're trying to get other people that are obviously working below market, and I'm sure every teacher in the world is going to say they're working below market. It's just, for clarification.
Yeah, so I know.
I think it's going to be very important.
Yes, sir, I agree. And so we pay close attention to that. I don't, since I got out of the CFO role, these numbers don't stick in my head anymore. But the amount of teacher salary increases last year was, that amount was significant. So it may not be reflected in this financial report that you're looking at, but there was certainly, there's certainly over my history of the district, a strong emphasis on putting teachers first in terms of their salary increase.
It was, it's the, you see the net activity to date and the salaries under the salary expenditures. But yes, the differential there for salaries and benefits, that's reflective of the incentives, but there were cost of living adjustments, $2,000 increases, additional market increases, and some other step increases. So we really tried to tackle with this last budget, talent retention and attraction. And this was one of the vehicles that we used.
And I just have a general question. I probably missed it, and it probably should have been on the last budget item. In watching and just knowing a little bit, and this is where it's like being a first-year law student, a little bit of knowledge is scary. With all the litigation going on and the potential settlements that go on and the potential to affect the bond rating, under whose, does that fall under this on a monthly reporting agent, or does that go back to your capital projects side of it?
It's all under,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry, the bond rating in that process, it's a financial process. And so it falls under the Office of Finance. It has implications for the capital program, et cetera. But we have a very strong bond rating, the best that you can have for a school district. And we also budget contingencies for settlements and et cetera. So it's never shocks the system typically, unless it's something egregious like $1 billion settlement or something, then we all wouldn't be here.
Well, I appreciate your optimism. And thank you. Do we have any further questions from the committee of Ms. Williams? Hearing none, I think we'll move on to item 14, which determine the board agenda items, the action items. And as they stand, I think we have 4.
Yes, item 2, item 3, let me see, item 5, item 4 and 5. Item 6. Item 9, 10, and 14. Did I miss one? I'm sorry, 9 was held. Absolutely. I can make a note of that. Thank you.
Do I have I'd like to make a motion to approve all of the discussed items for action to be presented to the board. Do I have a first?
So moved.
Second.
We have a vote?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned. No, we have to set a time for our next meeting. Next meeting will be February 7th, 2023 at 2 p.m. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very